Verified Action, the voting rights organization founded by Stacey Abrams, spent $9.4 million between 2019 and 2020 on legal fees for a boutique law firm where Allegra Lawrence Hardy, Abrams' gubernatorial campaign chairwoman, is one of two named partners. That's according to new reporting by Politico's Brittany Gibson.
The federal tax filings for the organization are not available beyond 2020, and Lawrence Hardy declined to comment when asked how much money the firm had received in the past 2 years. But Verified Action maintains their funding for Lawrence's firm work to draw attention to voting rights. So joining us now to discuss is politics reporter at Politico, Brittany Gibson. Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you here. So tell us more about the story. What precisely is going on and is the issue?
Yeah, so essentially we can see half the story on Verified's side right now. As you said, we have the tax forms for the nonprofit organization for 2019 and 2020, which show that they spent about $25 million on legal fees. And in interviews with the attorneys for the case, as well as people that work at Verified, they said that most of that money was spent on this litigation. They don't have to provide an actual breakdown. I did ask for it, but they have not released that information. So it's about $25 million for the first 2 years of this litigation. And this is the case that Stacey Abrams filed at the end of 2018, at the end of her last gubernatorial run. And it went to court this year. So there's an assumption as well that the legal fees will increase at least probably about the same amount of money as the first 2 years in these most recent 2 years, 2021 and 2022, when the case went to trial. On the state side, they spent $6 million defending this case, and the case got its verdict about a little less than a month ago, and Verified Action lost on the three remaining claims that made it to trial this year.
And what were the claims in that case, as a reminder?
Yeah, so it started in 2018 as a broader case. There were about 20 claims, everything from resource allocation that led to long voting lines, the closing and changing of polling places. There was even a claim about voting machines swapping votes for Abrams and switching them to the Kemp tally. But what made it to trial after a summary judgment in early 2021 were three smaller claims that don't impact as many voters, did not impact as many voters in the last couple of election cycles. One of them is exact match for voters that register. Mostly it's going to impact voters that register outside of the automatic voter registration that happens at the DMV when you get a driver's license or a non-driver's license of some sort. The accuracy of the voting rolls on election day. So that would impact voters that in the system's voter maintenance checks, when they look for people who might be felons and they say, oh, this person's name matches a felon that's also in this county, they might be a felon. And then the third part was the training of poll workers who would help voters cancel an absentee ballot so they could vote in person. So a very specific part of the voting training.
So at the end of the day, the accusation is that she spent an outsized amount of money, not just as compared to what the defense spent, but also I saw in your article, other kind of public interest attorneys have pointed to the fact that they would expect a litigation of this sort to be much less expensive. The claims, in fact, were not meritorious in the court of law, so to the extent that they drew attention to these voting rights concerns, it's not clear at this point whether it's positive attention. And people are concerned doubly so because the money went to a small law firm that happens to employ someone who's been a longtime associate and friend of Stacey Abrams and who worked for her campaign or worked for one of her organizations.
Yes, it's both. She was the campaign chair in 2018 and is the campaign chair for this campaign, which is usually an unpaid position that does a lot to do with fundraising, not so much the day-to-day of campaign operations. Yes, and that's exactly right. So the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund did a study up through cases in 2021 that looks at the fees that plaintiffs as well as states in defending these cases have paid in past cases similar to the one that Verified Action filed. And they found the most expensive case was $8.8 million in legal fees. That was a case down in Texas. And typically, they said it's a couple $100,000 over a couple of years. So the $25 million for just half of this case already makes it the most expensive. And I should add, it's not just Lawrence and Bundy, the law firm of the campaign chair. They had, I believe it was 8 law firms involved in this case. But Lawrence and Bundy, they were the lead counsel.
Yeah, so the implication here then is that this is something maybe not as egregious, but all along the lines of, right, the Black Lives Matter fundraising not being put to any good use and kind of just, being used for kickbacks or personal enrichment, and maybe, again, not on the level of buying properties, which is what happened with the Black Lives Matter organization. But this looks kind of fishy based on your reporting. It's hard to come away with another conclusion.
Yeah, I remain open-minded that there could be a perfectly logical or innocent explanation for why this case was so expensive, why they chose this attorney as opposed to, any other. I've asked, and maybe there will be a public answer. Maybe there will be some more explanation given on Fair Fight's side. I think what is important to think about here is what Kathleen Clark, she's a legal and ethics professor, said in the story. She said, there could be an explanation, but there's a fiduciary responsibility to make the best choices. Abrams was chair of this organization up until 2021 when she announced her second run for governor. And so in that role as chair of this nonprofit, chair of the board for this nonprofit, did she make the best decisions in spending the money that she raised? And Fair Fight Action during this time, this is just the 501c4, the nonprofit group, not even the Fair Fight Action PAC, which is called Fair Fight Inc. They raised $61 million, which is more than any other nationally known group in Georgia. And I found out through interviews with the now former organizing director at the group, she left earlier this year, that Fair Fight Action did not do any direct voter contact in the 2020 election cycle. They were, not alone in that during the pandemic. A lot of groups that normally do direct voter work didn't. I was able to verify that information talking to other voting groups in Georgia. So their main, the meat and potatoes of what this organization did, their main priority was this litigation. And that is where they spent, it looks like based on the 990 forms, the majority of their money.
Sounds like we should get Stacey Abrams on another magazine cover.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to ask you about this, Brittany. I don't want you to attest to this, but I have observed in interviews with on-the-ground grassroots organizers in Georgia, I detect a sliver of resentment, I gotta say, when I hear them talking about how underpaid and undersupported on-the-ground staffers are, as we as a nation witness the enormous fundraising gains and attention that has been paid to Stacey Abrams in particular as a kind of hero of voting rights and electoral victory in a state, despite her own failures to win in any of her own races. And I appreciate you for bringing this story to us today, because we're definitely going to have to continue following this and see if what looks like the worst case scenario is in fact the worst case scenario. It is a real injustice to the people who are really working hard on the ground. Thank you again for joining us, Brittany.
Yeah, great reporting. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we'll have more Rising for you. Stick around.